And good afternoon to those of you in Canada, the US. Happy Thursday for you. And here down under in Australia and New Zealand, happy Friday. Good morning to you. My name is Michael Haynes. Welcome to Breaking Through in B2B, my live stream show. I'm Michael Haynes, business growth specialist for small and medium B2B accounting, technology, and law firms. And this show, Breaking Through in B2B, is dedicated to providing insights, advice, and inspiration to those of us in the B2B space working in those domains of accounting, tech, and law. Today's theme for our discussion is turning data into dollars, growth strategies for small and medium B2B accounting firms. Really looking forward to this discussion. And today, for this discussion, I have a great colleague and friend, Steve Wilkinghoff, who is going to be giving us lots of insights. Steve, how are you this afternoon for you?
Hey, Michael, I'm great. I'm excited to be here and thank you for
Awesome.
inviting me.
Really glad to have you here, Steve. Really looking forward to our discussion. So, Steve, for the benefit of our listeners, viewers, those who are watching or listening to the recording, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a data specialist, business intelligence specialist, focuses on small to mid-sized companies, which in itself isn't that interesting, but how I got here, I think, is always more interesting. I started life as a chartered accountant, was a partner in a national firm, and really liked the analytical side, the financial analytics. So ended up leaving that partnership, went and built my own firm, and through a few early clients, actually ended up working inside private equity in the UK, running data science teams and actually doing data science machine learning projects. And what I came to realize was it's actually the accountant that's the nexus for good data, good analytics, good business intelligence. Because anytime I would do anything in the private equity firm, it was the accounting background that I was applying data skills to. And so
Okay.
that's how I came to be a business intelligence expert with a passion for focusing on the financial analytics and working with accountants and tech companies.
Fantastic. Fantastic. We're really glad to have you here. You know, growth is such a big topic for accounting firms. There's a real big trend, which I'm sure you've seen and heard about, that there are a lot of the accounting firms now are looking to become more advisory in nature. Various folks have been putting in studies that show that, you know, some firms are really looking to double down on that as their key source of revenue, for revenue and profitability through becoming more advisory. Now, Steve, you and I have had a few discussions offline, and you know the key to driving that growth is to have an effective B2B go-to-market strategy, not a marketing plan, folks. And what do I mean, really quickly, for those who are listening, watching, as to what a go-to-market strategy? Go-to-market strategy is your holistic end-to-end strategy and roadmap for how you're going to go to market and fundamentally drive revenue and drive growth. So this is encompassing everything from opportunity identification. So what are the right industries, markets, kinds of clients we're going to be going after? Making sure we have the right kind of insights, not just at the organizational level, but the buyer level. And Steve, I want to talk to you a bit more about that as well. What kinds of solutions is the firm offering? So as you're becoming more advisory in nature, what are those strategic and advisory offers? And then there's also, of course, the elements of demand creation, client acquisition, retention, and growth. So your B2B roadmap is encompassing all of those things. Marketing and sales is a component, but it's not all of it. You need that end-to-end roadmap. But the key to that roadmap is really why having you here today, Steve, is because data, good data, and knowing what to do with it underpins how we can drive that growth. So to kick things off, Steve, you know, can you tell us from your perspective, you've worked with a lot of growth companies, a lot of small and medium growth companies who are looking to grow, and, you know, we're talking about accounting firms today. You know, what are some of the kinds of data with that end goal in mind should, you know, our, growth-oriented accounting firms be looking to capture as part of helping them on their growth journey?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a core question. There's a few things as I view it when a firm is looking to do that and become more advisory from a go-to-market perspective. Really, they have to look first of all internally, and I'm shocked by how many firms, some fairly large firms, existing firms, still don't have a really good handle on their own internal data as it relates to their own clients.
Yeah.
We have data, right? Because A lot of firms are still tracking time. They're still doing billing whip and those kind of things. So they have data on the time element, but they really don't have good data necessarily around the profitability of a lot of their clients, and even some of the softer sides of things. Some firms nowadays are more and more integrated, and so they'll have multiple product offerings. They'll even sometimes, particularly in America, they'll have be associated with law firms or associated with IT firms, and they don't even look across their offerings to see which clients are buying which of their different offerings. They kind of do it, but they're doing it in Excel, and so they really need to look inwardly first of all.
Yeah. So would you say, Steve, kind of jumping in there, that one of the key metrics is to really know, in terms of your clients, what are those services, solutions, and offerings that they're buying, they're purchasing, and the revenue client spend, as well as the profitability across those. Is that
Yes,
fair to say?
yeah, that's a great, almost revenue per client and what is it doing over time, increasing,
Yeah.
decreasing. Um, Another one I when I talk to firms, on like a super simple one, is just think of it as a checkerboard. In fact, I call it a checkerboard, and think of every client, and if you have 4 or 5 different product offerings, just assign a 1 or 0 in each box, and zeros are red, when we're not doing any revenue in those product lines.
Yeah.
And very visually, clients will be like, oh my gosh, we think we're doing a whole bunch of tax or estate planning or audit or advisory. And when you look at it visually, they're shocked actually how many clients they're only still doing core services.
Okay. So it almost seems like doing that revenue. So revenue per client, per service
Yeah,
offering, but also an audit intake of, what are your client spend. So what are your
absolutely.
clients, actually spending their dollars with you.
Yes.
Awesome. And Steve, what about, and tell me your view, because from a go-to-market perspective, we need to have, revenue, profit, profitability, client spend. Um, can you give me some of your point of view in terms of, because there's some, from a go-to-market perspective, there's other kind of client things like, feedback from client surveys,
Right.
client meetings, things like website analytics,
Yeah.
is often quite important. Social media, are these elements that accounting firms can integrate as part of their analysis with respect to, helping them to drive growth?
Yeah, it's a fantastic point, and absolutely yes. Not only can they, but they should, um,
Yeah.
to get a true picture I mean, paid search is an interesting one, and I actually worked with a firm at one point. You'll get a kick out of the story. They were doing paid ads on Google to attract new clients. It was part of their go-to-market strategy. But when
Yeah.
they actually did the analytics and set it up properly, they realized that actually a lot of their paid clicks were existing clients that were looking for the firm's website.
Yeah.
And so, that's an expensive way to have a client look up your phone number,
Yes.
paying a few dollars a click every time. And again, so on an overall level, it's like, hey, we're getting pretty good traffic. But when they actually linked it back to their client base, they're like, oh, but we're actually paying for clients to find out our own contact number. Maybe let's do it a better way. Send the
Okay.
regular monthly email or something like that. I still remember the managing partner's face. He's like, we're spending how much for people to look at our phone number? I'm like, yeah,
So, Steve, you're raising a few interesting, a few questions are kind of popping up in my head. First of all, how do folks get started? So,
mm,
already you're raising the need for, we need to have an audit of what are our clients spend, what are they spending on what
right.
services, what are the revenues being generated. So there's that kind of revenue. There's those revenue financial elements, but then there's also the incoming elements, which are very much related to your go-to-market, as to what is driving traffic to your website, to your organization. So how do firms get started in terms of starting to, curate, to collate,
Right.
bringing some of this together in terms of some of that inbound, website traffic, Google Analytics, website traffic, social media listens, those sorts of things.
Right.
And how do we get started and start to pulling some of that together? What are some of the initial steps? How
Yeah.
should they start to embark on that?
Sure. I mean, there's 2 or 3 points, and they might seem kind of higher level, but they're super important. So that the first place to start is, I always tell firms, literally take a deep breath, because when they think about getting started around analytics, um, there's so much hype out there, and there's so many different software companies, and instantly they're caught up in all this drama of how do we get started. I'm like, okay, calm down and just realize just two things. First of all, one, it's going to be a journey. It's not an event.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, people will often, when they want to become more data driven, say, well, we can't start until we decide on a software tool, or until we decide on a software vendor. And they'll put all this effort into selecting the best tool. And the truth is, until you're actually trying to use your data, you don't even know what the best tool is. So all this time goes by, and the stress to get it perfect, to get the right answer, and there is no right answer.
Right.
And then along with that, they tend to think of it as an event. Okay, we're going to become more data driven by Q2 or by Q3. And you literally can start becoming more data driven today on an Excel spreadsheet. And so
Okay.
it's more, you know, get started by taking the drama away and just asking yourself, as a firm, whether you're an accountant, a law firm, an IT company, what's important to us, not the industry, not what the hype is. And the answer for every firm is going to be slightly different.
Okay.
There's patterns, but for example, and you know, a two partner firm that's been around for 15 years is
Yeah.
probably going to have issues around what we talked about earlier. What are our clients buying in our different service offerings, and who
Okay.
should be buying the other service offerings?
Okay.
A net new firm, maybe one or two partner firm that's trying to aggressively grow, they're probably going to be more interested in, how do we go out and acquire clients, and
Right.
what's that go to market strategy? So they might be focused more on social listening or paid analytics, and looking at, when something comes in through a certain channel, what does that customer buy, and when do they buy it, so they can almost build a life cycle around that customer.
Okay. So it sounds like, Steve, one of the first, there's kind of two steps there in terms of getting started. First of all, okay, well, deep breath, number one,
Yep.
and stay calm, number one.
Yes.
But in terms of an actual step, the first step is to really understand what are the goals and
Yes.
objectives. What are we ultimately trying to achieve,
Yes.
before we
Yeah.
start diving into getting into analysis paralysis. So what are our goals is step one.
Yes.
And then it sounds like step two from that, then potentially doing a bit of an internal audit, um, a client audit in terms of
Yeah.
who are our clients,
Yes.
what are they buying, and how much are they spending. So kind
Yes.
of that. So goal, and then a bit of a client audit, as being the first initial steps.
Yes. Yes. And it's you summarized it very well, because, and the reason those two are important is, there's the number of things we can do to become data driven is infinitely wide. And the reality is, any firm really only needs, to focus on two or three things at any given time. And so, for any particular firm, what are those two or three things? And so that's key. And then that whole client audit, analyzing who's buying what, every firm needs to know that, and very few do. And so it's almost a given that, put it this way, I have not worked with a firm yet that can adequately answer, who's buying what, when do they start buying it, and why. They just look at you like, well, and they'll go to their whatever practice management tool they're looking, and they'll try to come up with, oh well, and they'll have, they'll pull from timesheets, and they'll have 96 different codes, and they'll, oh well, it's like, no, like, if you're doing that, you don't have the right data. Who's buying compliance? Who's buying tax? Like, what are your core product offerings, and who's buying them?
Now, Steve, you've raised you've raised a great, point there. So it's about goals, initial audit around that client spend, who's buying what, how much are they buying, and then why are they buying. And so with the why are they buying, that often is where, when I'm working with clients, we are often getting into, I'm having them do depth interviews, doing some of
Yes.
that listening, doing client surveys. I'm big on interviews. They might be collecting insights from roundtable briefings. So now, in terms of some of those qualitative insights that I advise my clients to gather as part of this client analysis, I'm going to link this back to my original question. So now, how do we curate, how do we bring that together? How do they've collected, they've done
Mhm.
5, 6 interviews and they've gotten some insights with that. How do we now incorporate that into as part of our analysis? So what tools, what approaches do you
Right.
suggest when we're trying to starting to integrate that with some of the initial client audit, client analysis steps that you just talked about?
Right. So there's so there's a few ways to do it. One, when we do that survey data, it's absolute gold.
Yeah,
And it depends how we structure the survey. Sometimes if it's mostly their ranking or assessing, and so the responses are fixed, then it's
yeah,
really easy to analyze, right? On a rank of 1 to 5, whatever. Quite often, um, there's inevitably some part where describe something, or we're trying to get more of a
yeah.
free
There will be a
response.
lot of qualitative,
Right,
correct?
which is kind of what we want. That's the gold
Yeah,
in there.
yeah,
What we're trying to do is out of all those surveys where all the text responses, we're trying to look for patterns and
yeah,
themes. And realistically, one of the easiest ways is actually using some of the tools like Chat GPT. Like, if you're good at prompt engineering, you can literally can paste in responses from clients. Say, look, here's responses to this question from my 10 clients. What are the 3 themes? We can do that as humans, but
yeah,
ChatGPT is actually really, really good at that kind of stuff. And because what you're looking for is what are the 3 or 4 common themes those surveys say, and then we're linking it back to that client. When a client says they value our firm for its attention to detail, but yet the clients that say that are 80% revenue and compliance, that's golden information. Like, it sounds good when someone says that, but maybe if we're trying to grow advisory services, we actually
yeah,
don't want a whole bunch of clients that say that, because we want the ones
yeah,
that say, hey, I want them because they're looking for creative solutions.
yeah. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. This is a really, really good. So in terms of the curating, okay, so you've given us some good insights in terms of with some of that qualitative data that you're getting through surveys, through perhaps doing interviews with the clients that we need to be looking for. You're absolutely right. Need to be looking for common patterns, common themes, which you can do manually, but it's often
Yes.
hard if you're not a trained practitioner in market
Yes.
research. So leveraging
And,
the
and the
tools
risk
like
is high of doing it manually too. Sorry to sort of jump in, but
yeah,
like, because we're using this for go to market, if we think we can do it manually and we don't get it quite right because it's hard as a human, it's a pretty big bet. Okay, we're going to grow our firm based on this feedback, and we have our personal biases. It's like, this is
yeah,
what I think clients are saying in my survey, versus, so even if we do it manually, someone in your firm is going to know Chat GPT, have them throw it in, even if nothing else,
right.
to affirm what you manually think you're seeing.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I would say in terms of analyzing when it comes to the client feedback, that's something where you need to get a trained practitioner who's trained in, client analysis, a trained professional to do
Yes.
that. Otherwise, then you want to then consider leveraging the likes of a chat GP to help you with that. So that's great on the qualitative end. So there's some actual good suggestions about how to deal with some of the qualitative feedback. Coming back now to some of the more quantitative hard metrics around some of the financials we're talking about in terms of some of the metrics around, let's say, social listening,
Mhm.
some of your website analytics. What are some tools and things to help us curate and analyze some of those quantitative metrics and components?
Yeah, I mean, there's several out there. I mean, so I'm going to make an assumption that anyone listening has that data. So they either have Google set up properly, so they have the data coming in.
Yeah,
They've got practice management software. Um, I mean, there's 2 big ways of doing it. Number one, good old Excel still works.
yeah,
It's clunky, it's repetitious, it's prone to errors, but it is a way of someone starting.
yeah,
The other way is to get, and I'm going to say um, you know, business intelligence tool, and there's bunches of them. There's Power BI, which is my favorite. Obviously,
yeah,
there's Tableau is good.
yeah,
There's AWS QuickSight. There's Looker. There's Domo. Um, I mean, there's all sorts of them out there, and they're all fantastic, and they all are terrible, because there's no such perfect software. And so
yeah,
that's where, if someone wants to collate that data, pick a tool and
yeah.
either get someone that knows how to use that tool or learn it
Yes.
yourself within your firm and then use it. Because the minute you pick one, you're going to wish you had picked something else. It's just,
Right.
if you pick Power BI, suddenly it's going to be like, man, I should have picked Tableau. And no, you shouldn't have. They're all
Okay.
so don't fall in that trap of thinking we picked the wrong tool.
Yes.
It's like, if I need to hammer a nail, I'm going to buy a hammer. And unless I'm a high-end journeyman carpenter where the type of hammer matters, any hammer is going to work for me in my weekend project.
Right. Okay. So don't get too hung up on which brand of tool that you're using.
Yeah.
Okay. So
And just on that point, and just because I made the point earlier, that's where a lot of firms will get bogged down because they'll devote weeks or even months to what's the right tool. And you're far better to just admit that there's no perfect tool and get on with it and start
yeah.
doing something next week instead of deliberating for 4 weeks, because then you've lost another month of potential opportunity time where you could have actually been making decisions a week from now.
Awesome. So Steve, let's try and turn this into a quasi live example to kind of
Sure.
walk folks through. And I'm going to be thinking of one of my clients that I'm working with right now,
Okay.
an accounting firm working on their go-to-market strategy. So right now, we've actually been doing some of the things you've been talking about. So
Right.
we've done the client analysis. So we've done the extraction of, we've got the list of the core key clients, who they are, what industries they are, what are the services they're purchasing, what is their client spend, and also how we found, how they came to the firm. We
Nice.
have all of that data. We've also extracted, they don't have a lot of activity on their website, but they have been doing a little bit of, posting on LinkedIn, etc. So we do have some of some social media metrics. We also have their website data because they have been posting their content and it has been, SEO optimized. So we've got we've got that revenue data, client data around, what they're spending on what services, revenue spends, length of time with the organization, how they've come to know the firm. We've got some web
Nice.
analytics. We've got the social listening, and we've also done some client interviews. So we have some qualitative.
Awesome.
So I think you said using your tool of choice.
Mhm.
Walk us through how that firm now. I've given you kind of the
Yeah.
core set of data that we have now.
Mhm.
So we've got interview feedback, we've got social listening, we've got website analytics, and then we've got client data in terms of list of services, spend, tenure with the firm, all those things. Okay, we've got all of those key core inputs.
Right.
Take us through now what would be the process using your tool of choice. I think you said BI Power. How would you
Yeah.
go about now, work with that firm, guide them through what
Sure.
they should be doing now?
Sure. So the first thing we'd want to do is, Power BI or Tableau, is we want to obviously pull all that data into the tool. So it's going to
Yeah.
be in different spreadsheets, CSV files. We've done that. And then
So
not,
all of that can be easily I'm sure it's going to be a little bit laborious in time, but you can just dump all of that data
yeah,
right into the tool.
right.
Okay.
And this is where it gets a little bit technical. So we can dump all that data in. The trick in any tool, and that's why I say, it doesn't matter what tool. The trick with every tool is to do something what we call data modeling. And so on the back end, so picture, we think of a software tool, Tableau, Power BI, as the nice visuals, but
Yeah.
the back end behind that, all those different sources of data coming in, we need to, it's called ETL in the business, extract, transform, load. We have to clean that data. Like
Okay.
how does, and accounting firms are notorious. We're going to have clients with an individual client number and client name, but 6 of those clients are actually going to be part of the same client group.
Okay.
So it's understanding our data and saying, well, actually, do we want to build a flag to identify corporations that are part of a single group, and do we want to analyze actually at the group level? Probably.
Okay.
And that's what I mean about building that data model, and that really comes from the partners in the firm or sitting down with you, talking through what do we really want to analyze, and so
Okay.
because that's going to drive, you can drive yourself mad trying to build a perfect data model. And the truth
Yeah.
is, you only need a fraction of it to answer
Right.
any particular question. So it's getting those questions. And then I'd say, that same firm, a couple different ways of doing it. One, I would start with the list of clients or client groups,
Yes.
and then say, okay, what's the highest revenue ones? That's a
Yeah.
great ranking. Who are my top 20 clients by revenue, who are my bottom 20.
Yeah.
And then you also look across your product offerings and
Yes.
say, okay, of those top 20, what's the breadth? Is it 5 out of 5 if we have 5 product offerings, or is it 2 out of 5?
Oh, okay.
And the reason that's important is something I call it, client vectoring. Because if you picture, if we're partners in a firm and we're sitting around and we do that top 20 ranking, and we're going to say, man, you know, Michael Haynes, he's a great client. He's our highest revenue client. We need more like Michael Haynes. Might be true. However, when you look across all the product offerings, Michael Haynes might only be buying 1 or 2 of those, which means he should be a much better client than he even is, because
So that there's an opportunity to
there's an
really
opportunity.
increase that overall
Yes,
client lifetime value. Right.
right. Now there's also the same, right? We'll often get clients where, oh, this client who's number 8 ranked, or even sometimes down lower, 15, 16, they're small, but maybe they're only buying one of your product offerings. And if they could buy all 5, they'd actually become one of your top one or 2
Yes.
clients, right? So again, you'd approach that client differently. The partner would have a different discussion. Hey, we understand you're doing this. Again, you're better at messaging than in going to market, obviously, but how do you go to market with that client?
Yeah.
There's a proper way of approaching that client, having that discussion to creating that
Right.
revenue. I'd also then
So,
try to take that client list and link it back to some of the data on social listening on Google Analytics, right? So here's our clients. Let's get one of our interns or our summer student or an articling student when they're not busy. Here's the client list. Go look for their actual company pages on LinkedIn, for example.
yeah.
And then let's do some social listening there. And now we can link that data to the client data.
Okay.
Are these clients talking? Are people talking about them? Are they liking stuff? And if they're liking stuff, maybe there's potential for new clients or clients that like it. And again, so it just becomes this kind of web almost. I'm cautious saying that because again, you can see right away you end up with you can do almost anything. And it's like then as partners in that firm, we'd have to say, okay, so what are our actual objectives for the next quarter?
Yeah.
Is it
So it sounds like to kind of jump into and just to kind of recap for folks. Again, it kind of starts off with setting what are the clear goals, what are we trying to
yes,
achieve. We've got that set of data that I've given you, a
right.
client example of the revenues. We've got web analytics, we've got some
Mhm.
a qualitative interview feedback. So we get all of that entered in, recognizing that you said one of the steps we might need to do. There may need to be some cleaning up the
Yes,
data to keep it
yes,
simple, to make sure that we have aggregated different client entity names, those kinds of things. So
yes.
we
And
have
just to set the expectation there so people don't get jaded, if that cleaning data part, if if I were to spend 100 hours on a client's project, 80 to 85 of them would be that data cleaning. Like
okay,
it's actually the dirtiest, hardest piece of
okay,
work because and so I just want to set so when people are looking at that, it's like expect that that's going to be it should be hard because it's gold in there. That's why it's hard.
okay, right.
And your
So
competitors won't. That's the thing. Your competitor firms won't put in the effort, so they'll just be like,
right.
"This is too hard," and that's why you really want to focus on that.
Okay, so with that being the hard step of cleaning it up, and then the other analysis will be easier in terms of looking at who
Right.
are your key clients, what are they spending, what are they doing.
Yes.
What are some suggestions in terms of getting over that initial hump, which probably for many firms, because this we're getting into realms that they don't think and normally operate
Right.
in. Where should they go for help? How
Mhm.
can they help kind of get through that
Right.
that hurdle if that's really going to be taking up a big bulk of
Right.
this whole data, this whole intelligence exercise?
Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, there's 2 ways. Well, 3 ways. One, they can try to do it themselves,
Yeah,
which is viable. Two, they can hire somebody who's an expert in that. Right. There's
right.
specialties out there. That's right. There's all sorts of. That's how we met actually originally. And the third way is to actually just say, okay, rather than make it huge and complex, let's go back to our core objectives and let's figure out, what data do we actually need to answer that question?
Right,
And it's often not a lot. Like we
right,
have here's all the data we have. And to answer the 3 questions that are important to us, we actually only need this much data, a little bit from here, and to the point you can almost do some of that in Excel if you really want to get started.
So again, Steve, what you're really alluding to, that that setting up your objectives up front of what exactly is it we're trying to
Yes.
achieve, and then determining what are the appropriate kinds of data that we need.
Yes.
Likely at a high level, we will need to know around, who our clients are, what are they
Right.
buying, so what services buying, what are their spend, and then there may be some, insights around those clients
Yes.
that we're dealing with. Those are probably some of the core, but really setting those objectives up front as to what are we trying to achieve, and determining what data we need, and starting with some of those initial data points that we've just talked about.
Yes.
Uh,
And there's
is
a
probably
model.
is that fair to say as a roadmap in terms of some of the key steps? Clear goal and objective setting, looking at what data we might think, and then starting with some of those initial data points to capture that we talked about are some of the initial steps to kind of get going.
Yes. In fact, I have a framework I use, and so what I
Yeah,
suggest, it's very similar to what you say, and I call it outcomes, actions, and answers. So think of, as a firm, what are the
yeah,
outcomes we're trying to achieve in the next quarter or 2 quarters, right? Those are,
yeah.
and then once we've identified those, say, okay, well, to achieve them, what actions do we have to take that are different than now? And again, we'll be like, okay, if one of our outcomes is to um, double our number of clients, let's just say that was it, right? Well, what actions would we have to take? We'd have to go and attract them, we'd have to acquire them. And so once you've identified those actions you have to take to deliver the
Yeah.
outcomes, then it's relatively simple to say, okay, if we were to take those new actions, what answers would we have to have? And when you and say, well, we need to know these 3 things, bang, that's what you need to focus on your data efforts.
So
So
again,
it
so it's
takes the whole everything down
your
to like a
outcomes,
really narrow
actions, and
answers.
what's needed.
Yeah.
Outcomes, actions, and
Yep.
answers.
I call it
Love it.
the OAA loop, right? So what are the
Yeah.
outcomes? What actions do you have to take to achieve them? And what answers do you need to support those actions? And answering those answers, or getting the answers to it, is what you do with your data. And it should only be
Fan-
2 or 3 things, right? For any firm at any one time, there's only 2 or 3 things they really need to focus on. Different for
Awesome.
each firm, but
But I love that. Yeah, outcomes, actions, and answers. So
yes,
um, if they start with that framework in mind as part of their planning, so really a lot of this is what I think the big takeaway I'm getting from this, Steve, is that it's really coming down to the planning,
it
leveraging
is.
your outcomes, actions, and answer framework.
Yes,
Um, Doing that upfront planning, getting the right people involved
yes. And and and
to
and
map that out.
think of it like a wheel. So when we work with our clients, we actually take them through that, and we go on a quarterly cadence. We say, okay, what are the outcomes for next quarter? What are the
Yeah,
actions you're going to take? What are the answers you need? Build the business intelligence data around that, and then the next quarter in, like, okay, what are the outcomes for this quarter? Maybe they're almost slightly different, and so over time, think of it, so that OAA loop, I think of it as a wheel, right? And because what you built in quarter one, those answers are always going to still be there. So you're still going to use it. But now quarter two, you got another wheel. And then over time, you end up with this really in-depth, robust data solution, but you didn't try to do it all at once. You did
right.
what's important at any one point in time. It's like building muscle, right? You start with the
Yeah,
basics and lightweight, and 3 years
yeah.
later, you're much stronger and in better shape, but you didn't go from zero to that huge deadlift. You did it step by step by step.
This is really this is fantastic. So outcomes, actions, and answers, using that framework as a means to get started
Yes.
and to revisit regularly. And
Yes.
I agree with you. I think quarterly is a very good cadence. And then you can start building your analysis and your capabilities accordingly as you're revisiting that
Yes.
framework, and the answers required as you're revisiting it.
Right.
That's fantastic.
And I literally call it the outcome action answer loop for that very reason, right? The time you finish the answers, well, now what are the outcomes? They're gonna change a bit. Okay, so what are the new actions you need to take? And then it just over and over, it's a cycle, just over and over and over.
That's awesome. That is really, really good, Steve. Um, This has been a really great conversation, Steve. It's been
Great.
truly insightful, very practical, and action oriented. It's all in the planning
It
and
is.
leveraging your outcomes, actions, and answer framework as a means to map how you get started and how you go on an ongoing basis. And it's about taking that step, using that framework, getting
Mhm.
started. Um, and recognizing it's going to be an ongoing journey. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Steve, how can folks get connected with you, learn more about you, get more
Yeah.
tips about how to undertake data analysis, brilliance? How can folks find you?
Yeah. Good question. I mean, it's going to sound crazy. Probably the easiest way to find me and interact with me is on LinkedIn because I'm on there quite a bit, and it's just
Yeah,
Steve Wilkinghoff, like the name is
yeah,
there. If they want a website, they can visit the Data Accountant. So it's the and then DAT and then accountant.
yeah.
So thedataaccountant.com. That's my website. I got some free resources there. If they want to take some courses on Power BI, that's fine. But yeah, I mean, LinkedIn's one of the best places. And it's just,
Excellent.
and again, as you can probably tell, I'm a big nerd around this area. And so even if anyone has a question, even if it's not necessarily to retain any of my services or anything, but if you just have a question, bounce it off me. I will probably more than likely be willing to talk to you until you want to
Excellent.
hang up because that's just I love this stuff so much.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Steve, thank you so much. Great insights, really practical, action oriented. So, folks, connect with Steve on LinkedIn for any questions you may have around business intelligence data analysis for your firm. For those of you who are seeking information and insights around building your go to market strategy, please connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also visit my website, listeninnovategrow.com. That concludes today's edition of Breaking Through in B2B. Hope you enjoyed it. And again, reach out with Steve, connect with myself, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care and bye for now.